Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if genius Naruto had Duel Monster and Harem with 5 girls? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Zimmery for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. Link in the description. Twice. Not once, but blown up twice. Was this the end for him? Could he finally rest in peace after the shitstorm that was his life? Death didn't scar him as much as it would have a normal human. As the pinky nail-sized ball of little red, black, and silver tendrils that was all that remained of his body floated through the dark abyss, he couldn't help but think back on his life and how he ended up in this mess in the first place. It all began when he ran. Wait, no, there was a prologue and events that set up the prologue and a conspiracy, and you know what, never mind. It mostly began when he ran. Flashback. He, Dr. Alexander J. Mercer, had believed he was working on a cure-all for the countless diseases and illnesses that plagued humanity. Except for the Teletubbies and Barney, he wasn't stupid enough to think a cure existed for them. Anyways, he worked for a bioengineering company called Gentech on a project funded by a government Black Ops group calling themselves Blackwatch. After noticing that Gentech didn't count the aggressive and deadly strains of the virus as failures, but as limited successes, he began to get suspicious. After some digging, he learned enough to get the hell out of there, taking the only existing vial of the newest prototype of the virus, which he had named Blacklight, as insurance, and destroying all his research in the process. In hindsight, it might not have been his brightest idea in the world to flee from a government Black Ops group using the subway. And maybe he should have gotten a case or something instead of carrying it around in his lab coat's pocket protector. Blackwatch had easily caught up with him in Penn Station, where they got a bit trigger-happy and gunned him down. One of the bullets aimed for his heart ended up smashing open the vial and releasing the virus, immediately infecting him and everyone else there. The last thing he remembered hearing was one of his killers saying a quiet "oh shit" before he died, and then he woke up again. The migraine reminded him of that time during spring break in Mexico when he woke up to find a donkey reprise. While he was repressing the traumatic memory, the 2 doctors about to autopsy him ran off screaming about zombies. By the time he noticed he was in a morgue, he could already hear gunshots in the distance. Deciding that being found naked in a morgue surrounded by dead bodies was not something he wanted to do again, he stumbled outside in time to see some blacklight soldiers executing people, and quickly got the hell out of there. After instinctively devouring one of the soldiers taking a leak, he quickly realized that the virus had changed him. No, it hadn't changed him, had become it. By consuming the genetic data of a person, he could take on their appearances. By consuming their brain, he could copy their synapses and gain all their memories, knowledge, and skills for himself. It was also pretty damn cool that he could change his clothes using the biomass, and so he slaughtered, devoured, and evolved his way through the infected and Blackwatch, eventually getting himself blown up by a nuclear bomb Blackwatch intended to drop on Staten Island in the process of saving everyone's collective ass. But did he get any thanks for it? No, the Blackwatch bastards blamed the whole thing on him from day one. Eventually, seeing as how the virus couldn't spread off the island, Blackwatch decided to use it and the people trapped there for experiments. Of course, they never counted on an Alex chunk getting blown all the way back to the island, and so, the fighting continued. Alex worked on a way to improve the virus to make it help humanity, while fighting off Blackwatch and accidentally infected an unstable Blackwatch operative named James Heller. Of course, Blackwatch took full advantage of that as soon as they heard. They staged his family's death at the hands of Alex and offered to pump him full of some experimental biosynthetic nanites to help him. They conveniently neglected to mention it also acted as a homing beacon for a orbiting nuclear weapons platform, so they could take both of them out in one shot. And so they loosed him on the unsuspecting man. During his final showdown with Heller, one of the higher-ups of Blackwatch came to gloat over Mercer's defeat at his weapons hands, doing the typical villain thing and explaining how this was all his plan to use Heller against him. Alex could see one of the men behind him face-palming at his stupidity. When Heller heard this, the idiot didn't even know what hit him. Well, technically he did. It was called a tank. Alex and Heller teamed up and killed most of them off, either noticing one of them push a big red button. Since Alex was severely wounded from the fight with Heller, and Heller was already dying, Alex had a little heart-to-heart with him. In the end, Alex honored Heller's dying wish and consumed him so he could help finish of the people who killed his family. Unfortunately, or fortunately depending how you look at it, he also assimilated the biosynthetic nanites. And here is where bad luck reared its ugly head again, catching him with his pants down. The red button that had been pressed earlier finally made sense as he watched about a dozen or so nuclear bombs headed straight for him. Interesting thing about nuclear bombs, the collision of atoms rips a minuscule hole in dimensions, releasing a huge chunk of energy before closing. It happens so fast that nobody would ever notice. Of course, most people don't set of nuclear bombs under a microscope to see what happens, but whatever. While all those bombs were enough to wipe out Blackwatch, the infected, and the virus, it also opened a nickel-sized hole through which an Alex chunk was forced through before the rest of him was vaporized. Flashback end. And that's how he found himself floating through nothing. Since for some reason he couldn't reform his body, he was stuck using his newly upgraded biomass nanites to create a virtual library of all the information he had gathered as his only way to pass the time. He had no idea how long he had been wherever the hell this place was. As he finished building his virtual library, he wondered if he would finally die. Death didn't frighten him as it once did when he was a normal human. Now, it felt like a welcome release from the shithole that was his life. His only regret was that he could never pass on his legacy. Back when he was human he was sterile, and now, before he could finish his pity party, he felt a shift before he got a feeling of falling. Soon he heard a baby crying, a huge roar and a voice yelling Shiki Fuan before all the sound cut off and he fell onto something solid. Quickly reforming his body with some of his compressed biomass, he just stared as his mind shut down. He was in what looked like a small cage inside a sewer. Boiler room, he quickly corrected himself, seeing all the pipes leading from his cage off into the darkness. The thing that temporarily shut down his mind was what was inside the cage next to him. It was a Godzilla-sized fox, with 9 tails. And it was staring right back at him. Once he had stopped screeching like a little girl, the silence that followed could only be described as awkward. The red eye just kept looking at him until it eventually closed, and a deep rumbling filled the area. Alex just continued to stare at the giant fox until he realized it was laughing at him. "Oh, come on, I'd like to see how you'd react when meeting something that is big enough to make you look like a flea," he grumbled, not expecting an answer from the fox. So imagine his surprise when it replied, "Humph. I didn't expect a roommate when I was sealed, much less one that shrieks like a little girl." Typical human. The human was weird though, he smelled too powerful to be a normal human. Looking closer, it saw nothing out of the ordinary other than his weird clothes. Alex just stared at the fox, and for some strange reason he began to think of Clifford the big red dog until its words finally hit him. Sealed? How? Into what? And for that matter, where the hell is this? Last thing I remember is getting blown up and a lot of floating in cold darkness before I woke up here. Oh, and I'm not a human. The fox just gave him a weird look. Interesting. Yes, sealed. I won't explaining since it would take too long, but this one's father summoned the Shinigami to shove me into his newborn son. The fox's eye narrowed and Alex could feel a strange pressure building up that he could only describe as killing intent, but it was so monstrous he couldn't even move. That cursed Uchiha in the orange mask used me. The bastard used his damned eye to make me attack Konoha after tearing me out of the kit's mother once she had given birth. By now, the fox had noticed his distress before forcing itself to calm down and continue. This is the mindscape, the metaphysical representation of being sealed inside the kit. My turn to ask questions. Who are you, what are you, and why are you here? For what felt like hours, Alex explained his circumstances and how he had ended up here, constantly fielding questions from the fox, who he learned was called the Kyubi no Kitsune. They discussed back and forth, learning about each other's worlds, their history, and how they had ended up there. Well, it looks like somebody decided to grant your wish. The Kyubi had said when he had told it about his desire for a son and death like a normal human. What do you mean? Simple. Bijou can't die. This seal was designed to contain my Yuki, slowly transferring it to the kit until it's all gone. thus killing me and giving all my strength to him. Only problem is, the fool that was the kid's father sacrificed his soul to summon the Shinigami for the seal, meaning he bound our souls together, so I won't die until, or unless the kid does. You on the other hand were added in unintentionally, most likely being pulled into this dimension in the Shinigami's wake. This means that he didn't bind your soul to the kid, so the seal will slowly purify and convert your power, in your case the virus you're made of, into that of the kid. Since it's converting what you are made of, there won't be anything left by the time it's finished, and you'll be fully absorbed. The kid will gain this black light bloodline, technically making him your heir in a way, and your personalities will blend. Oh. He stared off into the darkness, thinking about everything he just learned. It seemed crazy, but he could already feel the draw on his biomass. Slowly he smiled. My legacy. As the year passed, Alex became good friends with the fox. Normally the fox would have hated him, but it had no problem with him since he wasn't one of those humans that saw it as a mindless beast, a yuki battery, or worse yet, a weapon. They found they had quite a bit in common. Both had been born from good intentions, both weren't considered human, both had bad experiences with power-hungry idiots, and both had decided to do everything they could to help their container. Because they were in the metaphysical realm and Naruto was absorbing Alex, he was able to use the Bionanites to control the mindscape and establish a link to the boy, made easier by the fact that his mind was undeveloped and unresisting. He and Kyubi were able to see and hear everything he saw and heard, and they were disgusted. Naruto may have been too young to understand what was happening, but they were old enough to understand that the civilian council was braying for his blood, seeing him as the Kyubi incarnate, and Danzo was demanding he be turned into a weapon. Alex and the Kyubi knew full well that Naruto's life was going to be hard, a belief that was reinforced as soon as an assassination was stopped mere hours after the council meeting. With his newly established control of the mindscape, he had managed to change it into an enormous tropical island with beautiful sandy beaches and a giant castle at its center. The first problem he encountered was with the Kyubi's cage. He had been able to turn his into a collar, but no matter what he tried he couldn't modify the Kyubi's cage other than to move it to a new location. I already told you not to bother. The seal is built around sealing my power, so there is no way to modify it without modifying the entire seal array. This made him pause and think. Going through his memories, couldn't think of a single way around this problem. Damn, if only you could separate your soul from your power and take human form, then you could just walk through the cage's bars while keeping your power sealed, he grumbled. His musings were interrupted by a large crash followed by the ground shaking, throwing him on his ass. As the rumbling continued, he quickly looked around, fearing that his manipulations of the shared mindscape might have caused some sort of irreparable harm. He stopped short when he saw the Kyubi smashing its head against the floor of its cage, quietly chanting stupid with each bash. It soon stopped that before looking at the confused virus and saying not a word. No matter what, not a word. With that, a small shining light flew out of the Kyubi's mouth, making it fall like a puppet with its strings cut. As the light passed through the cage bars, bones literally began to grow around it, followed by muscles, skin, hair, and finally clothes. When the process was complete, a 6-foot-tall bombshell was glaring at him. She had a perfect hourglass figure, red hair reaching to just below her shoulders with matching slitted red eyes, an aristocratic face with olive-colored skin and large breasts, easily DD, all held together by a beautiful red kimono that shimmered as if it was made of flames. The most noticeable features, however, were the 9 red tails with white tips and the fox ears on top of her head, also red-tipped with white. As he looked her over, her glare intensified. Quickly realizing the danger his manbits were in should he react the wrong way, he opened his mouth and said the first thing that came to mind. "You're a woman?" The following scene has been deemed too graphic and mentally scarring for anyone with reproductive organs that dangle. Once he had finished regenerating several vital organs, for a male, he and the Kyubi got back to work setting up the mindscape for when Naruto would visit. Well, since Kyubi had no control in there, it was more like she was ordering and he was obeying. Any protest he might have had died before it passed his lips as she flexed her clawed hand and grinned. For Kyubi's portion, she had set up several training grounds all over the island. Alex, on the other hand, spent most of his time in the library. In there, He drew upon the knowledge of all those he absorbed and created several dozen comprehensive books on all the subjects he could think of. Everything from biology to math, gardening to medicine, sewing to psychology. He even added a book on his theory of interdimensional travel, having experienced himself. He also added a computer link to the Bionanites so he could monitor his body and any changes he might go through, even made the interface for his body similar to a game with new information filling in the blanks as he acquired it. QB added what she knew, like the true and unbiased history of the elemental nations, the basics that all Bijou knew about the seals used to contain them, and the history and creation of bloodlines. They figured if the purified blacklight let him absorb the skills and traits of anyone he consumed, it might also apply to bloodlines. She would have added more, but when you're the size of a small skyscraper and can create earthquakes and tsunamis with your tails, there's not much need for techniques or tactics. And so the years passed for them, forced to watch the ignorance of humanity they knew so well brought to bear on an innocent child, but unable to do much about it. There were a few times they were able to help, but those times were too few compared to how much he suffered. When some ANBU with blank masks had placed suppression seals on him, for everything from intelligence and attention span to coordination and chakra control, Alex was able to limit the effects on his mind by forcing more of the Bionanites through the seal and having them augment his brain cells, increasing his synaptic response. Unfortunately, more people kept adding to the seals and the Bionanites could only do so much. They were forced to watch as he was beaten by the orphanage staff, who encouraged and rewarded the other children for doing the same. They saw him starved, insulted, and punished whenever he asked a question or showed any sign of intelligence. They could do anything as the abuse became worse and worse the older he got, growing from abuse to torture. Throughout it all, a hunger burned in his stomach, fueled by a single word. Why? On his 7th birthday, during the Kyubi festival, his question was finally answered. Naruto had just come home from his birthday celebration with the Hokage and the Ichirakus. The old man had wanted to take him out for ramen, and Naruto didn't have the heart to say no. Besides, even if the glares and whispers were more in number, they were dulled by the Hokage's presence. And in his opinion, it was totally worth it. The old man, Nichin and Tuchi-san were the only ones who treated him nicely, instead of the indifference, or outright hatred as was the norm. In fact, he could count the people who were nice to him on one hand 3. 5 if he counted the whispering voices in his head that warned him and gave him advice when he needed it. After eating his fill of ramen, 11 bowls, the old man had dropped him off at the orphanage. But with all good things comes bad. Today was October 10th, his birthday, but also the day of the Kyubi festival. The old matron of the orphanage usually stayed back to watch over him, while the rest of the children and workers went out to enjoy the festival. On this day, she would always give him a birthday beating for no reason other than she could. Usually she would spout off about him being a demon and deserving what he got. That was another thing he wondered about. Why was he called a demon? Was it simply because of the 3 red whisker-like marks on each cheek? No, that couldn't be it. He had seen those people with the dogs and they had red marks on their cheeks too. He hadn't done anything wrong, or anything to deserve such treatment. They kept calling him demon, but they were the ones who were demons. They were the ones who beat, starved, stabbed, burned, and electrocuted a kid. They were the ones who deserved the beatings. He sighed. What was the use? Whenever he told the old man about the way they treated him, the person would disappear just to be replaced by another, and the rest of the workers would get even worse. That was the whole reason for his mask. That, and the advice from those whispering voices. He pretended to be completely stupid, a loud-mouthed, happy-go-lucky idiot that wanted to become Hokage. But he wasn't stupid. He knew full well that none of the villagers would ever allow him to be Hokage. But he still wanted to make the old man proud. Just as he made his way into the room he shared, he was hit in the back of the head with a club. The old hag had heard him coming and waited till he made it to his room before she started beating him. Even through the haze of pain slowly covering his body, he could make out the smell of cheap sake. She had never been drunk before. This was bad. He tried to call for help, hoping the Hokage might still be close enough to hear, but she kicked him in the throat. She continued to kick and stomp him, hitting him with the club and shouting out slurred insults the whole time. By the time she got tired of beating him, She spit on him before going back to her office to finish drinking, not caring that he had already fallen unconscious. She never noticed countless seals appearing all over his broken and bloody body before small black and red tendrils appeared beneath them, covering his body and destroying the seals, leaving the ink to mix with the slowly growing puddle of blood. Mindscape. As he woke up, he expected to feel pain. What he didn't expect was to feel better than ever. His body no longer felt like he was wearing small, itchy clothes. His mind felt clear, clean, and focused. In fact, he could literally feel his thought process improving to speeds he never realized he had. He felt as if a heavy pressure was removed from his entire being. And with that, though, he was suddenly assaulted by countless memories he never remembered having. Ninjas using him for target practice, reading an old book he found about Bija and the battle between Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, looking at the album he found in the Hokage's office of the Yondaime throughout his life, Yanbiyu in white masks putting seals on him to keep the Kyuubi loyal to Danzo-sama, and countless other ninjas beating him before putting seals on him to keep the demon in his place, having the skin on his back flayed off by a pink-haired shrieking, and countless other ordeals that would have been traumatic for a normal child. Because the countless seals that had been suppressing his cognitive functions were now gone, his newly freed mind finally worked at its true potential, putting the pieces of his life together, and giving him firm control of his emotions. Everything made sense now. Bija couldn't be killed, only contained. His birthday was October 10th, the same day as the Yondaime defeated the Kyuubi, and all the villagers called him a demon or whispered about the Kyuubi brat when they thought he couldn't hear them. The only reason for his memory of looking at the album of the Yondaime throughout his life to be sealed away would be if there was some sort of significance to it. Blue eyes, blonde hair, add whisker marks. That realization brought a mixed reaction. On one hand, the Yondaime had saved Konoha and sacrificed his life to do it. He was a powerful heroic figure that everyone nearly worshipped, and he looked up to him, and wanted to be respected as he was. On the other, it was his father that used him as the container of the Kyuubi in order to save Konoha, and the villagers treated him like a demon because of it. No, he thought not because of him, but in spite of him. They could see the truth anytime they choose, but instead they wallow in their fear and hatred. As he realized that, the hatred he felt building towards the people of Konoha was replaced by pity. The same pity one would feel if a child with Down syndrome were to call you stupid. There was no point in arguing with the villagers or trying to change their minds since they believed what they wanted to. It wasn't the Yondaime's fault that they betrayed whatever trust he put in them when he made his sacrifice. He wondered who his mother was. She most likely had the last name of Uzumaki, but he didn't know anything else about her. He chalked up rectifying that as soon as he could. This brought up another point. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the man who was like a grandfather to him. He didn't like it, but he understood why the old man had always lied to him when he asked him about why the villagers hated him or who his parents were. He also knew the old man was rather spineless. He was Hokage. His word was law, yet the civilian and elder councils walked all over him. He'd been called before the councils countless times to answer for things he didn't do and had seen them in action. He couldn't tell him about the seals breaking, not until he was certain the old man would be on his side. Now to take a look at where he was, the trauma from the beating probably made me retreat into my mindscape. His opened his eyes and slowly stood up, taking a look around. It looked like he was on a tropical island of some kind. Looking around, he could make out a castle nearby. Seeing nothing else of interest, he headed towards the building. As he neared it, he could make out a man waiting at the entrance. He was pretty tall, wearing jeans and a hooded jacket that hid the upper half of his face. As he neared him, he realized that he himself was as tall as the man. Quickly thinking it over, he almost face-bombed. This was his mindscape, therefore his appearance here was determined by his mental maturity. Probably, he was just winging it now since the recent revelations about his life were still buzzing around his mind. The man spoke, snapping him out of his thoughts. "Welcome, Naruto, we've been waiting. Let's get you a tour and settle down somewhere comfortable so we can answer your questions." He was startled by the man's voice. It sounded just like one of the voices that would whisper advice and encouragement to him whenever he needed it. Hoot! He wasn't insane. Seeing the man turn around and head inside, he quickly followed, intent on getting some answers. After the tour, they finally arrived at a balcony facing the beach and the sunset with several comfortable-looking sofas angled to take in the view. As the man sat down, he noticed the beautiful red-haired woman he sat next to nervously looking at him with a worried look on her face. He smiled at her before sitting across from them. "So, you were the whispering voices that helped me." It was more a statement than a question. The man nodded before talking. "Before we answer any of your questions, we need to know something. What do you think of the QB?" The woman's body unnoticeably stiffened as she stared at him intently. Closing his eyes, he thought carefully. After a minute of awkward silence, he opened them and answered. "She looks really beautiful and is a lot nicer than the villagers. Any further judgment on my part will be based on her actions. I'm not going to stoop to the level of the idiots that made my life a living hell." His answer seemed to break the tension that had been building up as he and brought a surprised but pleased smile to the woman's face while the man gave out an amused snort. She had been slightly afraid, not that she would ever admit it, that Naruto would blame her for the way the villagers treated him and would hate her. Alex had reassured her that the seals had broken and he would be able to see the truth of things, but she still had her doubts. Guess the virus, nanites, and Yuki did their work. Seeing the perplexed look on his face, Alex decided to start at the beginning. "The beautiful lady next to me, as you've guessed, is the Kyubi no Kitsune, though she prefers to be called Akane. I am Dr. Alexander J. Mercer thought I would much rather you called me Alex." Deciding to just power on through the weirdness, he decided to ask the obvious question the man was waiting for. "While I sort of expected Akane-chan, beautiful name by the way, why are you here? And for that matter, what are you doing here in the first place?" Unknown to the two, Akane's smile grew into a predatory grin at his comment. "I just have to wait for 5 years tops. He's mentally mature, but still needs to grow a bit before he's ready. Hurry the hell up, puberty." Unaware of the thoughts going through her head, Naruto felt a chill crawl up his spine before he tuned into what Alex was saying. Alex told him his life story with Akane jumping in at the ceiling, telling him about the masked man, his mother's death, and confirming his suspicions of who his parents were. When it came time for Alex to mention the Shiki Fuin's effects on him and his eventual absorption, things took a decidedly grim tone. "You're fine with dying?" Naruto asked in a soft voice, getting teary-eyed that one of the people who had done so much to protect and help him would end up dying because of his seal. "Kid, I've had a good run. My life before Gentech was fun and all, but I was sterile and knew I would never be able to pass on my legacy. After Gentech, it was filled with almost non-stop slaughtering and consuming just to stay alive. Things like that change a person. Since I've been sealed in you, I've come to think of you as a little brother." This brought a smile to Naruto's face. "If this is my chance to pass on my legacy to someone, I can't think of anyone who deserves it more than you. It's not really dying anyway, you'll just absorb me. Our personalities already began mixing the moment I was sealed into you, so in a way, I'm already a part of you. Besides, the seal is purifying the virus so you won't have some of the problems I did. You won't be contagious unless you willingly infect someone, at which point they'll probably gain its powers. You won't need to consume to stay alive, and the seal has introduced it into your system at a stable rate, allowing you to adapt to it, meaning you won't have to die to gain its powers, and you'll even be able to have kids. Plus, now that you're consciously aware of it, you can finally utilize it, and I can begin training you in its uses, though you won't have full access to all its abilities until you've fully absorbed me." He gave a perverted giggle when he mentioned having kids, making Naruto blush. He may not have gotten the talk, not that anyone would give it to the demon, he thought with disgust. He had a pretty good idea what was involved in the process thanks to those cool orange books the Hokage sometimes left out when he took him to his office. "So, back to what you said earlier, and now that I know the technical detail, what did you mean by the virus, nanites, and Yuki doing their work?" "Easy, kid," Alex began, standing up and going into lecture mode. "Just as pressure and heat compress a chunk of coal into a beautiful and hard diamond, something similar has happened to your brain. The countless seals placed on you to restrict your cognitive processes worked by applying a large amount of pressure to your mind, keeping it busy, tired, and worn down, thus effectively retarding you. The number of seals placed, however, would have ended up completely burning out your brain and killing you. That's where the virus, nanites, and Yuki come in. Working together, they slowly burned out the dead, useless, or weak brain tissue and regenerated it in a stronger and more refined form, increasing its efficiency and adapting it to work as best as possible while being suppressed by the seals. Because of the seals, you only had a below-average intelligence with some improved cunning due to your subconscious need to survive. Now that the seals are gone, though, your brain is working at full capacity after having been refined and improved as much as possible under the pressure of the seal. Plus, the Bionanites were loaded with instinctual knowledge, so any psychological damage those bastards may have done has become a moot point. Don't get arrogant, though. While this makes you far more intelligent than kids your age and most normal people, it's useless unless you actually put that intelligence towards gaining knowledge. In other words, you may have the tools, but you need to learn what they're called and how to use them. Once he had finished, he bowed to the claps of Naruto and Kyuubi before sitting back down. There's also something else. Alex and Akane grew a bit hesitant, not knowing how Naruto would. You see, kid, since the virus is being released from the seals at the same time as Akane's Yuki, there is a good chance that it will decide the Yuki is useful and incorporate it into your body, turning you into what Akane-san refers to as a Hanyu, or half-demon, once you wake up. It doesn't do much, just makes your chakra more potent, similar to Yuki, and will allow you to use it without hurting yourself like a normal human would. It will also increase your senses and make your body stronger as time passes. Kyuubi cringed as if she expected him to hate her for it. Cool. That seemed to catch her off guard as she just sat there gaping at him. Tell me, Akane-chan, what would change in the way people treat me if I actually became part demon? That seemed to break her out of her shock as she scowled, remembering the things he had gone through. So, how long before I regained consciousness? Naruto asked, breaking her out of her thoughts. She looked over to Alex, wondering the same thing. Well, kid, while we've been talking, your Hokage has already found your body and taken you to the hospital, so you should probably wake up soon. Since you're now aware of us, we'll be able to speak with while you're awake, though you might not want to talk out loud since everyone might think you're being influenced by the Kyuubi. Just think it and we'll hear it. Hearing this, another question popped into Naruto's head. How were you able to see and heard everything that happened around me? That's thanks to the Bionanites in your brain. It allows the people in your mindscape to see and hear everything you see and hear, even the stuff you don't pay attention to or remember. If you inject the nanites into someone, it might even allow you to communicate telepathically, similar to Green's hive mind ability, but greatly watered down. How can I come back? Alex thought a bit before answering. We'll be able to pull you in whenever you sleep, but to consciously come here anytime you'll probably need to meditate until it becomes natural for you. Seeing that they didn't have much time left, Alex quickly wrapped things up. From what we've gathered, you'll be starting at the academy in 2 years. Knowing the current condition of Konoha, they won't really teach you anything and may actually sabotage you instead. We won't be able to teach you anything physical since it would attract too much attention, but there's enough knowledge here to be able to teach you some basics while you sleep. It might also be a good idea to fail a few times in order to lower everyone's guard. In the meantime, we'll have to find a way for you to get your own apartment or something, so you could train away from prying eyes. You'll also need to perfect your mask in order to hide your improvements and keep your cover. Now you might want to wake up or the Hokage might get suspicious. Alex and Akane said their goodbyes before everything faded into darkness, and he began to feel a deep ache all over his body. When he opened his eyes this time, he was nearly overwhelmed by all the sensations battering his senses and let out a pained groan. Calm down, kid, the sensory overload should pass. It's just your brain adapting to the virus and Yuki being incorporated. Play up the pity with the old man since it might be useful to get you out of the orphanage. But don't let on that anything's changed. Hiruzen Sarutobi was not having a good day. He had gone back to the orphanage because he'd forgotten to give Naruto his present only to find the matron of the orphanage dead in her office from a heart attack. He had quickly called his ANBU before heading to Naruto's room. What he found made him glad the matron was dead. Naruto was lying in a pool of blood. His clothing was torn and stained, but his body appeared to be fine, if different. His ears were slightly pointed and the baby fat on his body and face was gone, giving him a lean and slightly aristocratic look. His skin had darkened a bit to give him a tanned look, and his hair was tipped in red. The nails on his hands were thickened and sharpened to a point, making them look like claws. Quickly checking the seal to see if it had broken, which it hadn't, he scooped him up and headed to the hospital. After threatening some of the doctors into treating him, he wondered what had happened and how he was going to explain this to Naruto. He supposed that the beating that damned hag had given him had forced the Kyuubi's Yuki to flood out of the seal in order to heal him and keep him alive, giving him his new features in addition to the whisker marks. He figured the safest way to explain this to Naruto would be by telling him he had awoken a dormant bloodline. It was even true in a way. The Kyuubi had been previously sealed in his mother, and his father was the one who sealed it into Naruto, and it had always been sealed into an Uzumaki. Thinking of Minato, he couldn't help but marvel at how he had failed him. Minato, I'm so sorry I couldn't do more for Naruto. I wish things had been different, but the civilian and elder councils have gained too much power. I can barely hold them off, but it doesn't stop them from going behind my back. I just wish there was something more I could do to protect him. Hearing Naruto groan, he hid the little orange book he was reading and quickly made his way to the bed. Ugh, old man, what happened? Last thing I remember is you dropping me off and someone attacking me. Sarutobi decided not to get into specifics. I headed back since I forgot your present and found you unconscious. It seems you've woken a bloodline, Naruto. He gave him a sad smile. Naruto couldn't believe his luck. The old man just gave him the perfect explanation for his change in appearance, and set up the field for explaining his other powers as well as a perfect excuse for setting up a clan. He plastered a grin on his face, and switched to his not quite a shout but still annoyingly loud mask voice. Really, old man, that's so cool. This means I'm even closer to taking that hat. Can I go to the academy now? He said as quickly as he could. Hiruzen thought a bit. The orphanage obviously wasn't safe for him, so he would have to arrange for him to have his own apartment, and a personal guard. Weasel was professional, and he didn't show any bias towards Naruto. He had actually been close to Naruto's parents, and would take protecting him seriously. As for the academy, it was apparent that he would need to learn how to at least protect himself, and his enthusiasm in unknowingly following in his father's footsteps just brightened his day. Okay, Naruto, it's a little early, but since you've woken up your bloodline, you'll need to learn what it does and how to control it, and the academy is the best place for that. Since you'll be busy with school and you'll need a place of your own to study, how would you like your own apartment? This time, even Alex and Akane were shocked speechless by Naruto's incredible turn of luck. Naruto's grin just stretched even wider hearing this and decided to play up the guilt since it might come in useful in the future. Cool, my own place. Will I get normal food and an actual bed? Hearing this, Hiruzen barely managed to keep the scowl off his face even with the decades of shinobi training. Damn bastards! Quickly reining in his temper, he smiled at Naruto. Of course. I'll even assign one of my personal ANBU to protect you and get you anything you might need. You'll recognize him by his weasel mask. Oh crap. Naruto felt the stirrings of panic in his stomach. Calm down, kid. If the Hokage himself assigned him to you, that means he trusts him implicitly with your safety. Besides, you don't even know him, so don't judge until he's had a chance to prove himself untrustworthy. You'll just need to take it slowly and carefully. Reassured by Alex's words, he shouted out, awesome. When can I go to the academy? Well, it starts in a week, which is just enough to get you settled in your apartment and set up your monthly allowance so you can buy yourself the things you need. 1 year and 10 months later. He couldn't really say he was disappointed or anything, since he expected it, but that didn't change the fact that it still angered him. The first thing the teachers had done was to publicly humiliate him during his introduction, saying things like, there is no way a dumb bastard like you will ever be Hokage, so shut up and sit down. Some of the students had been surprised by this treatment, but the laughter quickly won out. The students followed the teacher's example and began to bully him in earnest when they realized they wouldn't get punished for it. Worse yet, the course books he had been assigned were sabotaged. His old self wouldn't have noticed or cared, but his new self did. Some of the most important pages had been expertly removed, and after comparing it with a neighbor's, he found out it was an outdated version. It didn't stop there though. As soon as he had raised his hand to ask a question, The teacher had kicked him out, yelling that if you're not going to pay attention, then get the hell out of my class. He noticed that the teachers looked for absolutely any reason to throw him out, sometimes not even caring for a reason, also that he wouldn't learn anything useful in keeping him alive. He had tried going into the library, only to be thrown out for disturbing the other students. The public library threw him out because demons like you don't need to learn anything. Thankfully, Alex had pointed out that the school librarian also doubled as one of his teachers after his second day, so if he was busy teaching class, Naruto could get access to the library. Taking advantage of this, he had gotten himself kicked out and headed to the library. But class is only 2 hours long with lunch break right in the middle. How am I going to be able to read anything substantial in that amount of time? He really couldn't see how he'd get any meaningful studying done in that short amount of time. Simple kid, you're trying to become a shinobi. Steal them. This had made Naruto face plant, much to the amusement of Akane. Besides, you're a student and you're entitled to them, no matter what the bigots might think. With that settled, he quickly made his way through the bookshelves, scanning for any interesting books or scrolls. Most of them were useless or children's storybooks, but he did find a few interesting ones. The first one he found was a book on village laws that was gathering dust. Knowing it would be helpful later on, he quickly stuffed it into his backpack. Next was a book on chakra, though it didn't show how to access it or any hand seals. Figuring it was better than nothing, in the backpack it went. After that were a few books on trap making, stealth, and evasion. He had just crammed a book on the academy taijutsu style into his bag when the bell rang and he ran home, knowing that the teachers wouldn't bother with his absence and hoping nobody noticed the missing books. Most of his sleeping time was spent learning from the books in his Mindscape library and training with Akane and Alex. Time outside the Mindscape and the academy was typical, with a few interesting points. Most of the shops either threw him out or sold him overpriced, defective goods and rotten foods. The food problem was solved by eating at Ichiraku ramen, and Weasel had taken to buying him his groceries and teaching him to cook along with buying him clothing. Although he had taken to wearing a bright orange jumpsuit he had found a few boxes of in the trash as a part of his mask. Yeah, he liked orange, but there was such a thing as too much orange. Still, it served its purpose and he didn't need to worry about clothing anymore, since no store was willing to sell him any. After that, he began scavenging through the trash and found a gold mine, and many other horrible things. Remembering Alex's words, he kept an eye on the clan compound's trash. Although the clans tended to incinerate their old and worn-out scroll after transcribing them, he had gotten lucky once or twice and some of the clan brats had carelessly thrown away their old scrolls. Most of them were useless, though he did find a useful one, a scroll on beginner's meditation and concentration technique from the Yamanakas. He had also gathered some defective ninja gear which he put to good use after Akane had pointed out that he could get some revenge on those store by pranking them, and doing it in an orange jumpsuit would give him practical experience and improve his stealth and trap-making skills. Alex had added that sticking around and getting chased by the village's military police force would also increase his endurance and evasion skills, after which he began teaching Naruto something he called parkour. Thus, the demon prankster was born. Nobody knew how he did it, but they knew it was him since he was always at the scene laughing his ass off. Some stores were dismantled overnight, leaving behind nothing but piles of wooden plank, nails and their merchandise. Other stores had rabid squirrels jumping out of egg cartons or exploding milk cartons, and countless other things that made the civilians jumpy whenever they went shopping. The civilian council had tried to make him stop and punish him, but thanks to the book on village laws he was secretly studying he managed to point out that they had no proof he did it. It seemed that his new Hanyu appearance had made them even more violent towards him. Interestingly enough, once he had finished studying a few of the books he could make them appear in his Mindscape library. Weasel had taken to calling him Ototo after a month. Curious as to his intentions, he had let countless suspicious things slip around him to see if he would report anything to the Hokage. It had surprised him that all he did was warn him to ignore, and immediately tell him if he heard a voice in his head, even though he wouldn't tell him why. After saving him from another attempt at beating him by a mob, Naruto had managed to catch a glimpse of his eyes and saw the Sharingan. Akane had immediately thrown a hissy fit that ended with a splitting headache after 14 hours of ranting about filthy Uchiha. He had spent nearly 5 months pestering and pranking him to take off his mask before Weasel finally broken. They had reached a compromise. Weasel would take his mask off when they were alone if Naruto did the same. Akane had grown used to Weasel, or Itachi Uchiha as he was revealed to be, and after a lengthy debate had finally relented that not all Uchiha were evil bastards. Because of this, they had grown as close as real brothers. Itachi had told him about his clan and family. He believed that the Uchiha had become far too arrogant and power-hungry and had stressed to Naruto how one should never become too reliant on bloodlines or special abilities as that would only weaken a ninja. Something only his mother agreed with. Alex agreed as well, telling Naruto to be careful who he consumed once he absorbed him since it would be hard to block out all the memories right away and only gain what he wanted or needed. Mikoto Uchiha, Itachi's mother, was a very nice woman with the generic black Uchiha hair and eyes, though hers were softer and had a shine to them while the other Uchihas were a dull and angry-looking black. Itachi had brought him over one day in order to get him to play with his little brother, and Mikoto had immediately begun fussing over him. He had wondered why until she let slip about her teammates while reminiscing about back when she was an active kunoichi, Hikari Hyuga and Kushina Uzumaki. She had barely realized her slip before Naruto used a truly fearsome technique that Akane had taught him, the Koinonomi no Jutsu, puppy eye technique, and asked her to tell him stories of her team since he had never met another Uzumaki before. She had quickly caved, figuring he didn't know Kushina was his mother, and seeing no harm in telling him stories of her, and told him countless tales of their team, and some of the missions they went on. Itachi had sat in on most of these stories and the three grew closer as time passed, practically becoming like family over the next nearly 2 years, much to the ire of the rest of the Uchihas. Itachi's little brother Sasuke, on the other hand, was the same and in some ways worse than the rest of his clan. He was his father's son through and through, just as arrogant and proud, blindly believing in the superiority of the Uchiha and their Sharingan. Something made even worse by the fact that the Uchiha clan served as Konoha's military police force. What made it worse was that he looked down on his own mother as weak for spending time with a clanless orphan not worthy of setting foot on Uchiha soil, something his father had taught him. Itachi had hoped Naruto could befriend him and pull him away from his father, but it had only served to anger Sasuke that his big brother and mother would waste their time on Naruto, something that saddened Mikoto and Itachi to no end. The arrogant little brat really got on Naruto's nerves. It was near the end of the second year that he decided things couldn't keep going as they had. He had barely passed his first year at the academy, and had just failed his second-year final test, and his suspicion that they were sabotaging him was completely and thoroughly confirmed. Akane and Alex had pointed out that the only way to fix this was if an actual shinobi decided to teach him, and the only shinobi they truly trusted was Itachi. Seeing no other way to learn what they needed to know, they had decided to let Itachi in on some of their secrets, and hope for the best. His current prank, and his favorite by far, had been to take almost all the underwear from the Uchiha compound and superglue it on the Hyuga compound's walls before booby-trapping them with stink bombs set to go off when anyone tried to remove them. Who knew the Uchiha were secretly so kinky, he thought, while Akane and Alex rolled around his mindscape howling in laughter. This was made even more embarrassing by the fact that he had replaced all their other clothes with pink, skin-tight, full-body latex suits he had salvaged from the trash of a questionable store in Konoha's red light district. This served two purposes, the first being revenge on the military police force for constantly arresting him every chance they got, and stealing anything he had on him at the time, and the second being to draw out his intended target. The MPF had been forced to chase him for hours, showing off their new look to the villagers as they screamed in rage before he finally headed to the designated meeting place in the outskirts of the Forest of Death. After landing in the clearing, he sat down and waited. "Are you sure about this, Kit?" He could practically feel the worry in Akane's voice. "Yes, Akane-chan. Not all the Uchiha are scum, just the majority, you've seen that. Mikoto and Itachi are nothing like the rest of their clan. I trust him. Besides, this is a necessary risk. The academy won't teach us anything and we can only get so far on independent study. I've taken my mask off around him that he could have easily informed the Hokage of my behavior, but he hasn't. We need to get stronger but we won't be able to do it alone, he answered her in a firm tone. Easy kid, you've made your point, we're just worried about how this might turn out. Let's talk later, looks like he's here. Alex was right. Itachi stepped out from behind the tree, his usual emotionless face in place before he spoke in his matching monotone voice. I read your note. Thank you for leaving mine and Mother's clothes alone. Now, what did you need to ask me? I was just wondering if I could trust you with my life and secrets. By the end of the sentence, his face was as unreadable as Itachi's, and his usually bright and vacant eyes had become intense, practically glowing. This made him stop. Naruto had actually become like the little brother he always wanted, and he was now being completely serious, something he rarely did. He had known that Naruto was still hiding things from him, but hadn't dug deeper since he believed he would tell him when he was ready. The answer is yes, Otuto. Itachi let slip one of his rare smiles. Naruto had finally trusted him enough to let him in on whatever he was hiding. He and Mikoto knew who Naruto's parents were, and after seeing the way he was treated, had taken him under their wing. Minato had been his hero and goal growing up, and Kushina had been his mother's best friend and would often come visit. He felt he owed it to them to keep Naruto safe and look after him, and earning his trust was a great step towards that. Then meet me at my apartment tonight. Slipping his mask back on, he ran off back towards the village, leaving Itachi deep in thought about what his little brother was up to. I really hope he takes this well. A knock on the door broke him out of his thoughts. He opened it and let Itachi in, leading him over to the couch and taking a seat. What was it you wanted to talk to me about, Otuto? Itachi asked with a raised eyebrow. Itachi, what I am about to tell you must not leave this room. I fully intend to tell the old man once I graduate the academy and get out of the civilian council's reach, but I can't tell him before since it would be too dangerous. The reason I'm about to tell you these things is because I trust you and feel that I owe you for treating me like family, and because I need to ask you a favor. This brought Itachi's full attention to focus on Naruto. Whatever he was about to tell him was something big if it meant bringing it up with the Hokage. I'm going to tell you the full story, but I don't want you interrupting. Once I finish, I'll answer any questions you may have. Please understand, Itachi, I'm taking a huge risk telling you this, but I trust you. It all began on my 7th birthday. The matron at the orphanage had gotten drunk and had taken the beating she gave me too far, the pain and trauma sending me into my mindscape. While it sounds bad, it was actually a good thing since it forced a bloodline called Blacklight to awaken in an effort to keep me alive and broke countless seals in the process. Itachi grew alarmed at hearing this, and Naruto saw that. Don't worry, that seal didn't break. Thanks to the broken seals, when I woke up in my mindscape I could think clearly, and regained all my sealed-away memories. Going through my life, I was able to piece together why the villagers hated me and who my father was. Once I was done, I headed to the castle in my mindscape expecting to meet the Kyuubi, but instead I met her as well as someone else. This brought a surprised look to Itachi's face, making Naruto smile. Yes, the Kyuubi is a she, and no, she isn't controlling or manipulating me. She isn't some mindless demon of destruction. She just gets pissed easily by humans constantly treating her as such and trying to use her as some sort of weapon, and tends to get really bloodthirsty. Tell me, have you ever heard of Kyuubi attacking anyone or anything other than when Madara Uchiha was controlling her? This brought an almost automatic answer from Itachi. The Kyuubi attacked 7 years ago. Naruto smiled at hearing that. On that day, a man in an orange spiral mask with one eye hole and a strange Sharingan tore Akane-chan. Here he got a raised eyebrow. The Kyuubi, out of mom once the seal weakened after she gave birth to me and used his Sharingan to place a genjutsu on her, making her attack Konoha. During the sealing though, someone else was accidentally sealed in me as well. Once he had told him about the mysterious man with the strange Sharingan, unanswered questions finally made sense, like how the Kyuubi simply appeared outside the village walls or why he corrected himself, had attacked in the first place. Naruto continued, breaking him out of his thoughts. This other person that was accidentally sealed in me came from a different dimension. Here, Naruto gave him a quick rundown on Alex and his past as well as his improved cognitive functions and being a Hanyu before continuing. So the seal is slowly purifying the virus, and I'm absorbing it, slowly gaining his powers and melding our personalities together. Once I fully absorb him, I'll gain full access to his powers. Right now I can only absorb blood, and probably gain bloodlines since they're contained in living genetic tissue, as well as having an improved sense of smell and being stronger than a normal kid my age with far more stamina thanks to Akane-chan. The reason I am telling you this is because I trust you, and I want you to train me. These past 2 years, the teachers at the academy have constantly thrown me out of class and done their best to deny me any knowledge that might make me stronger or might save my life. Hell, the only reason I know how to access my chakra is because I eavesdropped on that class from outside. Any hand seals or taijutsu they teach me, they do so incorrectly, and the only lesson they don't bother sabotaging for me is history. I'm not asking you to break the laws and teach me things I shouldn't know or anything, just teach me the things that I should be learning in the academy. Silence permeated the room as Itachi closed his eyes, and though this was Naruto's secret, and it was a big one. Konoha's laws were strict about anyone other than a Jounin sensei teaching anyone other than his or her team in order to keep their techniques and training methods out of missing Nin and other hidden villages' hands, with the exceptions of clans and clan business. But teaching Naruto what he should already be learning from the academy would be fine. As for the man in the orange mask with the Sharingan, if it was true and word got out, it would cause all kinds of trouble. So Naruto was right in waiting until after graduation, since as a shinobi he would fall squarely under the Hokage's authority. And the changes, Naruto was still Naruto, and this black light really was no different than a bloodline. He could only see one way to confirm everything Naruto had told him, though it was risky. Still, Naruto was like family to him and his mother, so if it worked it would be worth it, and bring them closer together. Opening his eyes, he looked at Naruto. Would you be willing to do something to prove what you've been saying? Naruto looked relieved that Itachi hadn't reacted with hatred, suspicion, or anger, simply asking for proof. Sure, what do I need to do? Itachi pulled out a kunai and made a small cut on his palm. I want to see you assimilate my blood. This surprised Naruto, and he hesitated before Alex urged him on. Do it, kid, you've got nothing to lose. He'll get to see you assimilate something and prove your story is true, and we might get an answer to whether you can gain bloodlines like this. Are you sure about this? At Itachi's nod, Naruto cupped his hand and caught the blood before Itachi closed the cut with some medicinal salve and watched Naruto closely. You sure this is going to work? It should. Bloodlines are genetic, so the black light should be able to detect the Sharingan as being beneficial to its host and incorporate it. Should Alex? You know what, whatever. Here goes nothing. With nothing to lose, he absorbed the blood, small barely noticeable thread-like black and red tendrils disappearing as quickly as they appeared. Careful though, first time hurts like a... Wait, what? Before he could get any further, he fell on the floor and began convulsing, screaming in pain through gritted teeth. It felt like molten lead was being poured over his bones, slowly flowing up into his skull and focusing in his eyes. It hurt so much, it felt like he was going to die. Less than a minute later, the pain finally stopped, and he noticed Itachi standing over him frantically checking him for damage. I'm fine, apparently the first time hurts like a... Naruto said, wiping off the sweat, tears, and spit that stained his face. And it's even worse when you consume your first body! Exclamation point. Getting back up, he sat back down on the couch and accepted the glass of water Itachi handed him. Once everyone had calmed down, he closed his eyes and channeled some chakra to them, feeling them sting at their first activation, before opening them. Itachi's eyes widened at what he was seeing. Instead of the red and black of the usual Sharingan he was expecting, the iris was blue, but slightly glowing, while the pupil and single tomo were both golden colored. After a few minutes of wide eyes, Itachi finally blinked. Smiling, he said to Naruto, we'll begin your training after the Kyuubi festival, as long as you promise to tell the Hokage everything once you graduate from the academy. Naruto smiled and nodded enthusiastically. Nobody would ever know how that event would bring about the restoration of Konoha. Thanks for watching this video. You really enjoy this video. Like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow Zimmery for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.